It's 1932. You work at the Briggs Auto Body plant in Detroit. This job is important for your family, and you're under a lot of pressure. Your older brother just died. It was a bad case of pneumonia combined with a heart defect that no one knew about that killed him in his sleep. Your older brother was the rock of the family, and everything he's holding up has landed on your shoulders. The pressure is even worse given that your wife is expecting, your first kid, and the marriage is already strained because neither your family or hers approves of this marriage because she's Jewish and you're not. You put that out of your mind as you pick up your spot welder. Your shift is starting. But then you start hearing the voices. Now, at first, it's just what you're pretty sure are the thoughts of all the other workers on the line. It's not fun to hear, but you can block that out and just focus on your work. But then you start to hear the screaming. Hello, my name is Garvin, and I read things and talk about them on the internet for your entertainment. Before I begin, though, this video is going to touch on audio hallucinations, mental illness, and severe bodily trauma that happens to children. If any of these topics are going to bother you, it's okay to skip this video. Please take care of yourselves, folks. Today, we're going to look at one of the early flashpoints of modern science fiction. The Shaver Mysteries, or the Shaver Hoax, as the critics called it. Both of these titles refer to a series of stories that appeared in Amazing Magazine, a science fiction magazine in the mid-20th century. These stories started with a letter in 1943, but the stories themselves ran from 1945 to 1950. After doing some research, I decided before just jumping into the first story, entitled I Remember Lemuria, I should talk about the controversy and the two men most responsible for the publication of these stories. Now, just to be clear, I'm just covering the basics here. Each of these men and the controversy itself could sustain a full video, if not several, so for now, let's just cover the main points. Richard Shaver was born in 1907. He grew up in a rural Pennsylvania farm, but moved to Detroit after becoming an adult, following his parents and his older brother Taylor, known as Tate. Tate was the pillar of the family due to both his personality and his job with the Federal Immigration Service. Richard would work a variety of jobs trying to contribute to the family, but none of them really panned out, and he ended up attending the Wicker School of Fine Art. He would earn money to pay for his classes by drawing in the park and selling those drawings, doing freelance work, and posing as a nude model. This is where he attracted the eye of his first wife, literally. Her name was Sophie Gurvich. Sophie was a teacher at the Wicker School of Fine Arts, and she was also the daughter of Russian Jews who had fled to America to escape the pogroms of the Tsar in 1904. So they had opinions about their daughter dating a non-Jewish American. She ignored those, they started dating, but the Depression would make their lives more difficult, leading to the closure of the Wicker School of Fine Arts in 1932 due to a lack of funds. Against the wishes of their families, Richard and Sophie married in July of 1932. Shaver took a job at the Briggs Auto Body plant in Highland Park. It was the original Ford Auto plant, and he took that job to support his family. Sophie tried to find work as a commercial artist, but throughout 1932 and 1933, she didn't have a lot of luck, and she would become pregnant with hers and Schaefer's daughter. To make things more stressful, Tate would die in February of 1934, killed by pneumonia combined with untreated high blood pressure, causing a thickening of the heart muscles and a decrease in the heart's capacity to move blood. A couple months after Tate's death, Shaver's parents left, heading back to rural Pennsylvania, leaving him and Sophie alone to pay for an apartment that was meant to house about 4 or 5 adults. It's at this point Shaver began to hear voices on the line he believed conducted through his spot welder, and then he began to believe that people were following him with the intent to harm him. After a couple of months, he fled to his parents' home, leaving behind his pregnant wife. In his defense, he was not in his right mind, but I could see how that would grate on his in-laws. Sophie did what most of us would do in this situation. She called her dad. Her father, who since moving to America had become a small business owner and was deeply connected to the local Jewish community, had a lot of resources, legal and otherwise, to call on. And he used them after a, quote, horrible experience, unquote, that no one has left any details on, so we have no idea what it was. It was enough to convince Sophie to follow her father's instructions to go to the courts, have Shaver declared legally insane, and have her installed as Shaver's legal guardian. He was then sent to Ypsilanti State Hospital, but the hospital was overcrowded, and given this was the United States and the Depression, almost certainly underfunded. After a couple of months, Shaver was deemed as not a danger to himself or others, so to help relieve the overcrowding, he was given the right to basically come and go with authorization. So he was often given day passes to go visit his wife, and eventually was even allowed to leave Michigan to go visit his parents in Pennsylvania. And for a while, this seemed to work. Things seemed to settle down. I wouldn't call it stable, but at least manageable. But then Sophie died in December of 1936. She was using an electric space heater to keep warm because the apartment she could afford to live in had a faulty heating system. And while taking a bath, she stood up and without drying off, picked up the heater. A flaw in the device led to her being electrocuted to death. Their daughter wasn't even 3 years old. Shaver's father-in-law moved quickly to get a family friend appointed Shaver's new guardian and to force Shaver to give up all legal rights to his daughter. Sophie's parents would then adopt her and tell the girl that her father and mother were both dead, which I understand a lot of his prior moves, but man, that is screwed up. Getting back to the story, though, there are competing versions of how this happened. Shaver would claim he was lied to and signed the papers under the belief that it would lead to his release from the hospital and allow him to care for his daughter. Others would claim that his remaining brother Donald and his parents talked him into signing and he knew what he was signing when he did it. Either way, afraid that he would be locked away in the hospital for the rest of his life, Shaver decided to flee the state and lived as a hobo until he was caught as a stowaway on a ship going to Nova Scotia. Upon his return to the U.S., he was committed again. This time, he was committed to Ionia State Hospital for the Criminally Insane, a place with 1,500 patients that, on a good year, released maybe 15. So, unsurprisingly, it had the reputation that men went in, but very rarely came out. And Shaver would spend 5 years here, being released in 1943. He went to live with his parents after being released, and got a job as a crane operator, and started writing in his spare time. He was even briefly married through a mail order service, but when the lady found out about his time in the mental institute, she left, and I can't really blame her. Finding out that your partner was committed is not something you should be learning after being married a week. That should have come up long before. The divorce led to him meeting Dorothy Erb, who was also getting a divorce, and later they would marry and she would stay with him until his death in 1975. 1943 was also the year he sent that fateful letter that started the Shaver mysteries by coming to the attention of science fiction editor Ray Palmer. So, let's talk about him. No. Wrong Ray Palmer. We need the real guy, the one who actually existed. Okay, there we go. Just for reference, the DC superhero, the Atom, named Ray Palmer, was actually named after the real-life Ray Palmer, who was the editor of Amazing Stories in this time period. Now, Ray's life is an amazing story in of itself, if a somewhat brutal one. He was born the child of a working-class family in Milwaukee, and when he was only 7 years old, his life took a rather painful turn. He was playing near a delivery truck. What kind of truck changes depending on who is telling the story. Sometimes it's a beer truck. Sometimes it's a milk truck. In a couple of versions, it's a butcher's truck. All versions agree that Ray somehow got his leg stuck between the wooden spokes of the truck's rear wheel, and when the truck started moving, it took him with it and slammed him repeatedly against the street, cracking the vertebrae in his back. The truck owner stopped the truck as soon as he heard Ray screaming, but by then it was too late. Ray's family didn't have money for a doctor, but the city's social services were able to get him treated, and he got one of the first spinal grafts ever performed. This is where they graft bones from elsewhere in your body over your spine, and with luck, those bones grow over the broken disc, thus protecting your spinal cord. This surgery was still incredibly experimental back then, and I can't say it was a rousing success because Ray barely survived and would spend years after this in constant pain. The surgery also stunted his growth, so when he was full grown, he would be barely over 4 feet tall and have a hunchback. And if that wasn't enough, in about 10 years, he was diagnosed with Pott's disease, a tuberculosis of the spine, and was told he had 6 months to live as the vertebrae of his spine would basically disintegrate, and then he would die from an exposed spinal cord, something they didn't have any kind of treatment for. As you could guess, Ray not only survived, but the doctors were shocked to see new bone growth covering the infected areas. And Ray would credit his recovery to pure willpower, spending hours every day doing nothing but mentally visualizing that bone growing over his spine. This experience would also lead him to a number of mystical and fringe beliefs later in life. As soon as he could walk again, Palmer took up bowling, jogging, and softball, as if to prove that his disability and his later struggle against Pott's disease hadn't defeated him or even slowed him down. In all fairness, everything I found says that he was considered a good bowler. I couldn't find anything about his jogging or softball, though. He also started writing and sending letters to science fiction magazines, and eventually he was hired to the position of editor of Amazing Stories. By 1943, he was the head editor of the magazine and answered only to the 2 owners of the company. When his assistant editor read Shaver's letter detailing that he had discovered the ancestral language of all humanity and begging them to publish, he laughed about crackpots and threw it in the trash. Mr. Palmer fished that letter out and decided to publish it on the basis of proving a point to his assistant editor, and he thought this letter would help them sell magazines. Mr. Palmer was right. The letter did sell magazines, and in 1945, they would publish Mr. Shaver's first story, I Remember Lemuria. Although I should note Mr. Palmer played a big hand in that story. Richard Shaver sent in a 10,000-word piece entitled Warning to Future Man. Ray Palmer took that and turned it into a 31,000-word story called I Remember Lemuria. Although Palmer would maintain till his dying day that all he did was take the ideas of Mr. Shaver and create a fictionalized plot that would communicate it to the reader. He gave complete and total credit for all ideas in the story to Mr. Shaver. Now, this wouldn't be a big deal. It's a science fiction magazine. They print stories. But Mr. Palmer took the step of declaring in editorials that this was a true story, just like Mr. Shaver did, and that he believed Mr. Shaver. And this is where the controversy comes in. For 5 years, Mr. Shaver's work took center stage at Amazing Stories, and it made the magazine a lot of money. It created a story of ancient civilizations and degenerate monsters hiding in deep underground fortresses, using ancient technologies to torment modern men and women. Shaver would claim these beings, and he called them Deros, would use rays to tamper with people's emotions and thoughts, and would come up to the surface to kidnap people, to torture, enslave, and even eat them. Yikes. I should note that these creatures had an impact on popular culture. They would show up elsewhere, including in Dungeons & Dragons, where a race of psychic insane evil dwarves called Deros lurk in the underground, plotting against the rest of the world. The Shaver Mysteries would boost sales of the magazine from the low tens of thousands to over 250,000 an issue, and this is when other successful magazines considered themselves lucky if they hit 90,000 an issue. But the hardcore science fiction fandom loathed this story. The fact that it was sold as a true event made them feel like they were being taken for fools. And in response, they made Ray Palmer their public enemy number one. Denouncements were hard and fast, and fans in science fiction conventions across the nation held public votes to condemn Mr. Palmer. Ray Palmer would fire back in his editorials, snarling at his detractors in print and basically pouring gas on the fire, which did sell more magazines. But by 1950, the owners had had enough, and one of them forced Mr. Palmer to stop publishing the Shaver Mysteries as fact. And Mr. Palmer kept his word and did so. But he also resigned, created his own magazine called Fate Magazine, and created the Shaver Mystery Club in order to keep publishing Mr. Shaver's work. Over time, Palmer would drift away from the Shaver Mysteries, focusing more on UFOs and other popular fringe and mystical beliefs. But Mr. Shaver kept pushing his ideas until his death in 1975, even selling what he called rock art, pictures he claimed to see in cut rocks, to show what he believed was the truth. Now, I don't consider my research here complete, but I do think I can draw some tentative conclusions from what I've read. And I don't think this was a willful hoax. Now, before you get upset, I'm not saying I believe in the Shaver Mysteries. There's simply zero evidence for any of the claims provided in the text. And without real physical evidence, I just can't believe in super advanced ancient aliens or underground civilizations tormenting us through rays. You're going to have to show me something to prove that. And the stories in of themselves are not proof. So I'm pretty sure, 100% sure at least right now, that the stories are not fact. I am saying I am dead certain that Richard Shaver believed every word he said and wrote. The question is, did Ray Palmer believe in it? He did turn his back on a very lucrative job because of it, and I think it's likely he believed in at least some of it. Mr. Palmer had some very esoteric beliefs that I'm not going to go into detail on, because that's an entire video in of itself. I believe, however, that Mr. Palmer thought there was more truth in these stories than not, at least when he started. I could be incredibly wrong on that, though, and future research may change my mind. Now, it is certain that Mr. Shaver was experiencing audio hallucinations, and according to some of my sources, which will be listed below in the description, anywhere from 3% to 28% of humanity will experience audio hallucinations at least once in their life. Now, most people will not have the full-blown hearing voices that aren't their experience. Most people will just hear things when they are about to fall asleep or when they're just waking up. And from what I understand, it's got something to do with how the brain processes things, and it's not anything to be alarmed about. But even if someone is having the full-blown experience of hearing voices that aren't there, from what I've read, and I'm not an expert, that is not necessarily a sign in and of itself of mental illness. However, the vast majority of schizophrenics do experience this, especially early on, in addition to developing paranoid delusions, which is what I think Mr. Shaver was going through, especially in the 1930s. And it's unfortunate he didn't have the resources for treatment we do today. So with all that said, in the vanishingly small chance that you are one of these people hearing voices, I want you to understand, I'm not saying you're bad or crazy or even that you're dangerous, but I am saying you should contact a mental health professional just in case it's the sign of something else, something that would be worse for you. Now, I know I'm just a guy with a super tiny YouTube channel, but I would consider it a favor if you did this, just putting your mental health first, alright? Thank you. On that somewhat somber note, I think this is a good place to end this week's video. I hope you found this video informative, or at least entertaining. If you did, please leave a like, a comment, or even subscribe, as all of these help me in my battle against the Dread Lord Algorithm. Dare be on his name. Speaking of help, I'd like to thank my biggest patron supporter, Big Steve. I hope you're finding these videos interesting, bro. If you'd like to join my Everwise patrons who get a vote on future videos, please click on the link below. It's $1 a month. Next week, we look at the actual story of I Remember Lemuria. Is it worth all the fuss? I hope you join me to find out. But until then, take care of yourself, take care of each other, and of course, keep reading.